Well, hey guys, it's Montel here, and thanks for tuning in to another edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel, where we talk about everything, anything cannabis, and also issues that are affecting us in a social way, especially leading up to this election year. And also, when I find a topic that I'm really interested in and I want to talk to you about, I'm going to talk to you about it. Like the topic that I found today. And it struck me because, I have a close friend, and I'm going to be honest about it, a very close friend of mine, and who is involved in something that I find absolutely ridiculously fascinating. And, as we get together often, we kind of leave business lives out, but then, we talk about things. And I go, dang, Montel, why aren't we talking about that on Let's Be Blunt? So today, I'm not leaving cannabis behind. I'll make sure by the end of this podcast, I give you some updated cannabis news. But I want to introduce you to somebody. And I'm going to introduce somebody who is, I'm going to throw out a term to you. She's a clairvoyant diagnostician. I bet you never heard that before. And is also well known as a medical intuitive, an energy medicine practitioner, a spiritual healer. I'm using terms that really literally describe what she is. And she does all this through the use of something that's called the Akashic Records, which we're going to talk about. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about the one and only Bobbi Vogel. Thank you, Bobbi, for being here today.
Hi, Montel. Thank you.
Good, darling. Look, it's weird because in some ways I feel like, you're on Let's Be Blunt, which is a show about cannabis and also other issues. And I don't believe in psychics. I don't. I believe that rather than use a term like psychic, I believe that intuitive is probably the better term. And I believe that people have more intuition than others because just like all of our brains are different, I think there's something different. There was something different about her brain than my brain that gave her, maybe she had a few more brain cells in that area of the brain where intuition comes from that made her more intuitive and be able to look at things from a different perspective. And that's what I think about you, Bobbi. I think, are you a psychic? From my perspective, I will never call you a psychic. Mm-hmm. But do you see things that I don't see? Hell yeah. And, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we are all brought here differently. We're born differently. We're configured differently. And so something's going on in that brain of yours that makes yours different from mine, that you see things that I and a lot of people I know can't see.
Right.
So let's start from the jump. What is a clairvoyant diagnostician?
Well, I know what the term means for me. I think it's probably different for everybody. Like you say, my brain is able to see, hear, feel a lot of the times. So for me, it means that I can tune into someone's energy, body. If they're in front of me, I actually place my hand on their head. Tune in, and I can begin to see their energy moving or not moving. Most of the time, right? Stagnation. And then I am shown where density is in the body, where it isn't moving freely. Mm-hmm. And then if somebody is open or ready, then information starts coming through about how that density got there. Because a lot of times it's emotional. Most of the times it's emotional. And so very detailed, evidential information comes through from a lot of the times loved ones on the other side.
On the other side.
On the other
side. So you're tapping into, you're tapping into what has been termed and called the Akashic Records, if you will, in a way, or no?
I started out, I mentioned Akashic Records because that's what connected me. I already had a gift. I didn't understand that I had a gift. I didn't understand how I was being communicated with by spirit.
And let's tell people at home, when you hear the term, and I'm sure you've heard it, I heard that somewhere before, Akashic Records. I never knew what that meant. Well, what it kind of means is Akashic Records are a compendium of all human events, thoughts, words, and emotions, and intent that has ever occurred in the past, the present, or the future. So it's kind of like the, what do you want to call it, if you will, without lack of a better term, but the universal book of life.
Right.
It's a record of everything that happens everywhere, anytime, all the time, now, yesterday, and tomorrow, right?
And then there's also a crossroads. We can come to choice as well. I mean, there's
Okay.
a lot to say about it. So I was guided. I mean, there's lots to say, but I was guided by other healers to find a teacher. And Linda Howe happens to be a dear friend of mine from Chicago. She's in Taiwan right now teaching 500 people Akashic Records.
Okay.
And so when I saw her, I haven't seen her in a long time, when I saw her face on Facebook saying Akashic Records practitioner, I was like, oh my gosh, this must be it. I didn't even look it up. I didn't care. I signed up for it, and I took the course. And the very first time that I had to, what's called open my own records, all this information just started coming through to me, and I understood very clearly, at least the beginning of how I was communicated with via spirit, my team, because, we all have our own, I call them my peeps.
Okay, so other people will call them your spirit guides?
Spirit guides, yeah.
These are people that are on the other side.
Right. Yes.
Are they family members, or can be family
Not all
members?
the time.
Not all the time.
And even if they are family members, a lot of people get confused thinking that, I had to be close to them when they were here, or I had to know them very well when they were here, and that's just not the case.
Okay.
So they'll show up on our behalf in order to help us, whether it's just information or if it's to help us move through confusion, whether, it's different for literally every single person.
And so most people walk through life never, ever, ever, ever tapping into the Akashic Records, right? Never even recognizing that that's something that's available for them to tap into.
Right.
Others, does it just pop up to other people? It's like to introduce the listener to what it is you do and to this whole concept, what's the value of it? Why would someone want to tap into that other side?
Well, I mean, for me, like I started to say, the Akashic Records was just the beginning. And it's evolving. It sort of was, I have tons of respect for it, of course, but I was sort of a jumping off point for me.
Okay.
And then I literally, people ask, how did you understand to do this and start healing or helping people with medical issues?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
You can do your questioning yourself and answer it, but no, it's a good question.
Yeah.
So how did you start?
So I began working with people in the records, and then I started understanding that loved ones on the other side, really enjoyed or could communicate with me easily, and I was able to they entrusted me to get their information through
to the person that you're talking
to my client, right?
Got it.
And even some non-clients have been interrupted at kids' birthday parties before by people.
But that's gotta be about as unnerving as anything. I mean, when you're saying okay, so the first person that you said, let me see if I can do, did you pull up a guinea pig and say, let me see if I can do a reading for you?
I did it with myself, and then actually a friend came in from out of town. And I also had to do a lot of sessions on people who have been doing it for 20-plus years before I could finish the Akashic Records Practitioner's course. It's pretty intense.
Okay.
With Linda Howe, it's intense. And so a friend came from out of town, and she said, sure, go ahead, open my records. And I did that, and it was phenomenal how detailed the information and the pictures that I was seeing.
But I'd be sitting there going, what you talking about, Willis? Who's talking to me? Who is talking to me? Stop it!
Oh, no, not me, because...
How do you do it?
My journey to get there was because long story short, I was a real estate agent in San Francisco, Oakland area. And so who would have thought, right? And I moved to Los Angeles. I came on really hard times. That's a whole nother story, for another time. But I began to rely only on faith. And then my own parents on the other side, because I was stripped of everything but faith. I went from like having this huge, gorgeous home in Oakland to living in a garage. I turned in the key to my Mercedes Benz. You know, I'll never forget the parking lot in Venice, California. And I had to start from there, and I started healing, and I started relying on what I couldn't see. And when things started shifting, when I started doing that and becoming grateful, no matter, even though I didn't have the things, you know, I was terrified and the whole thing, things started to shift, and I started, you know, meditating more, asking, you know, for guidance, show me a sign, and then it'll show up, you know, little by little. And so I started really knowing already there's something much greater here. And it kind of primed the pump, you know, for me. And that's the short version. And so I began working with a lot of different healers who would actually work for free on, you know, for me, because I was trying to get back up on my feet. And all my just 20 years, people would tell me, oh, you're definitely, you know, psychic, or you're very intuitive, or this. Yeah. You know, I never had time for it. But then when I began realizing, you know, people have told me, oh, you talk in pictures. They've told me that before. And I realized that when people ask me a question, my answer is in a picture.
Something that you visualize.
Yeah, well, it just is there.
Right.
And
so that's when that friend of yours said, yeah, okay, I'm here. Go ahead, do your thing.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, the detail that came through, and it was actually a friend of someone else. I didn't know anything about her. And the information that came through was so detailed, and there's symbolism and analogies used a lot of times, but they're so perfect for, you know, and they're easy for people to understand the analogy and then hold that analogy. And
so it's okay. So now with this person, what were you seeing? What did you see? What did you tell them? Because they said, okay, go ahead and do your thing, and you said, okay, is it like it's a reading?
Yeah, and that was way back. I mean, that was back 3 years ago.
Let's start way back there.
Yeah. So it's not just spirit, but like her son, who at the time I think was 12, she was having a lot of problems with. I didn't know that, but she was having a lot of problems with, and she was also very serious with a new boyfriend. And so not only can I commune with spirit on the other side, or just guides on the other side, also there's this realm, the spirit, the soul of the son can show up and also participate.
Got it.
And how he feels, and actually what is going on for him. Now, see, in physical form, if I would have walked out into the living room and asked this 12-year-old kid, right, hey, do you feel this way or that way? He'd have been like, what?
Couldn't have given you an answer. Okay,
yeah,
right.
get out, you know, don't talk to me, lady, you know? And so when you can't eavesdrop on people unless they want to be heard, right? So I can't. There's a lot of people that are worried, like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm afraid to like stand in front of you because you're gonna see everything about me. I would never do that because I need to have permission, and it's sort of a spiritual law that I'm gonna follow always. And so this helpful information about this boy, right? Because we got to the core of how this kid is really feeling that would have never come out for years, right? So then she was able to, and that he was watching her every move. So he was very kind of obsessed with her, right? And her because he had his mom alone for a long time.
Okay.
And now there's this man around, right?
Got it.
So there's jealousy, there's all kinds of confusion at that age around things. And so together, they were able to sort of work through all that with him. They had to do some tough love stuff, but they had all the information about what was really going on.
So when you say that, so his spirit basically communes through you to let the mother know that there are these issues, and the best way to get through to the son is if we work together and X, Y, Z.
And exactly how to work together. It's just like currently, the little girl I'm working with, cerebral palsy, and she's nonverbal from birth, and she's almost 8 years old. She, for the first time, I've seen her now 4 times, she, for the first time in her life, was able to communicate with her parents. Her mother was in the room in her life and talked about how terrified she is, right? And so she has some PTSD from this traumatic birth. It was 30 hours of horror for she and the mom. And
So this is the little girl, the 8-year-old girl's spirit, basically telling you this is what she lives with, living through.
yeah, I mean, she's right in front of me, right? And I told her, tell me anything you want. I can hear you. You don't. I can hear you if you just talk to me. So she started sharing, so back up, her parents brought her to me not to hear about her feelings necessarily. I mean, this is a huge bonus, but she had been vomiting unexplainable for 5 months. Her mom even had to take off work and the whole thing. She was in and out of the hospital, this little girl, and they couldn't figure out what she's vomiting, and gagging. And so they thought, what the heck? You know, they had heard about me through other people, and so they brought her. And the very first session was more, because I don't guide my sessions, spirit, you know, they have their agenda.
Their agenda, right.
And I just work on behalf of, you know, what I'm learning. I have a little more control now, but who can I help and how can I help them? That's what I say every day. So how can I help this little girl? So first they do this scan, the body scan, and they show me all that it's actually not in her stomach. It's more, you know, well, it's anxiety times 1,000. And then it's more in her esophagus. And I have a drawing at home of it. And then her trachea this, and then the flat, you know, all these other things. First, that there's density inside her esophagus. Do we know? That's why I would love it. I said, I would love if a doctor was in the room with me right now, because what if he could verify, right? Like, is it energetic in her esophagus, or is there truly like narrowing of the esophagus, right? We can do a scan.
Right.
And so what if what if her doctor was standing there and I was like, this is this, this is this, this is it.
Right.
That's where I hope we go. But then the little girl starts telling me, I'm ready to leave. She said, I can't live this way. I don't want to live trapped in this body.
And when you say she's telling you this, she's not speaking
not
these words.
speaking.
This is her spirit telling you this.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
And she's also giving enough detail that her mother knows that this is really, you know, like history that I wouldn't have any idea of, and that she feels like a burden, and that she suffocates like 20 times a day without anybody knowing, because she just can't get any air, and then she just sits, but nobody can tell that it's happening. She can't really move much,
Right.
and so she's sitting here in terror, suffocating, while her mom's, you know, like in the room, whatever,
Moving
and
around,
they're
doing
just
that,
doing her
right. Sure,
thing, you know,
sure.
because they do a ton. Like her mom's amazing and takes her everywhere, and you know, and this kid has the greatest personality. When you know, I get to know her now because she can talk to me about little girl stuff, you know, freely. And so her mom got all this information. Her parents got all this information about how, you know, what would be helpful and all these things. And then come to find out that I said, are you actually nauseous? Like, does your stomach, like, do you feel nauseous when you vomit? And she said, no. And so I can put my hand on there, and what I see when I put my hand on there is like a bubble of air. It's just air. And her mom said, oh my gosh, I actually have a gadget thing to drain the air out if I ever feel, and sometimes I do it before she eats or after. And I said, no, you need to do it more often. So this girl, I mean, there's so many details, but this little girl now has gone almost 4 weeks and has vomited once. And after doing some, energy work, and, some people might doubt that, but she was in hospitals
Right.
up until the day she met me. Now I get to talk. She told me in the session before last, she wanted to be alone with me.
Mm-hmm.
So she wanted her mom to stay outside because she doesn't want to upset her mom, with some of the stuff she wants to talk about.
Sure.
Which is incredible. So the mom goes and sits outside, and we're kind of clowning around, and she starts using her little arms to show me how strong she is. And I asked her, do you want to walk? Do you want to feel better? And she'll say no, right? And then we have to have this talk about, well, you have to get on board with this, right? Because you have to will yourself. Like, we can do all this work together, and she has speech therapists and, all kinds of people in her corner. But it's kind of the will to live.
Right.
Right? And then being shown what I call her lights being off. I'm able to see meridians in the body as well, which I call little blue balls and things. And so when those are not lit up, we're not, our physical body's not being really communicated with energetically. So, there's just so many amazing things about all this that is just mind-blowing.
Okay, so now for more people, you just the example of the little girl who has cerebral palsy, but you, as a medical intuitive, people will come to you who've had issues that doctors can't explain.
Right.
And then you help them break through and figure that out. Give us another example. Give me another example.
So one of my first really profound examples and this is a moment when, like I said, they leveled me up, which was a woman. I had raffled off 2 sessions at my stepson's school, and people, bid on them. And this one woman called and said, I bid on one of your sessions, and she made an appointment with me. She showed up, and to say she was dejected and depressed and just is an understatement. And she told me that, so her daughter at the time was 11, and that from the time that her daughter was born to the moment she walked in my door, she has had level 10 plus pain when she urinates. And of course I understand, hey, if you showed up, I know I can help you because Spirit told me we will send you who we want you to help. So that's how it works. And so I said, well, let's see what I can help you with. And she saw me once a week, I think, for about 3 months, because so many of her issues were trauma related, emotional trauma related, which I'm not going to share because it's her personal information, but it was one organ after another, really. And then we got down to the reason for this pain as well. But after the second time, I believe, that she saw me, she went down to a level 3 pain. And now she's pain-free.
And during that session, she acknowledges the things that she's been told. Who's telling you the things about her that's helping her relieve her pain?
Well, for her, she has a pretty powerful grandmother. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but it's absolutely the truth, because so in that situation, all of a sudden I opened my eyes because I'm guided as to where to put my hands or what to do. And when I'm in this realm, I'm not here, right? So I just do what I'm shown and told. And it was like I had spirit doctors flanking me, literally, and saying, do this and this and this. Unfortunately, I'm an ex-paramedic. I went to school at Loyola in Chicago. So I have a pretty decent understanding of things. And I just, when I put my hands there, not only the spirit doctors, but the grandmother and then her guides and people may not like this, but God shows up because, God is light. And for this situation, because it was such a big deal, and was my first introduction into health related things that I could help with. I never imagined that. And then all of a sudden there I was, like, learning and understanding that people need to, most people anyway, there's emotional wounds that we sign up to heal. And these illnesses bring forward the opportunity for healing.
Okay.
So that's why this spontaneous healing for some people perhaps is a soul level. They're ready for that, at a soul level. Maybe they've done a lot of work. Maybe they, it's different for every single person. But for this person and for a lot of people that I see, there's a lot of emotional things that
are blockages,
and they can't identify. It's assaultive to our energy, right? And we take that in. We take in a traumatic experience, and traumatic experience can be what we would see this, tiny or huge. It depends, right? It depends on our perception and who we are, but it comes in and it assaults our energy, and it comes. Then it comes in. That's the etheric body. It goes into the physical because it starts in the etheric and then duplicates.
Explain etheric real quick. Explain it. The etheric body.
Well,
it's a vast majority of humans. It's a vehicle or instrument in the astral energy phase, right? So you got to explain that.
Yeah, I'll just explain it the best I can because it's talking in pictures again. But so what I understand, because what I've been taught via spirit is, and it is Einsteinian as well. It's like there's etheric, energy, then there's your astral, the physical, and it is, the etheric body comes first. And there's actually a lot of scientific evidence of this in a lot of books. The etheric energy comes first, and whatever gets built up in the etheric energy duplicates into the physical. It's almost like we're a hologram of our etheric body.
Okay.
And the meridians, the meridians are a part of the communication between the etheric and the physical.
Okay.
And what I've seen is there's larger, more, surface meridians, which are a lot of the classic acupuncture points. See, I didn't know anything about acupuncture until they started showing me points and where to put points, as I've worked with a few acupuncturists actually. And if the lights aren't on, if the electricity, like your spinal cord is a main, it's like a main channel, as if you're like wired your house. It's like flip the main on, right? And if that's not functioning because of anxiety or whatever it is, then we start getting density, for instance. This is a simple. And then if our meridians are not all lit up, maybe even just in our legs or maybe in the arm, things will start to stagnate. And
energy starts to stagnate.
And so illness begins in the etheric body. And if we can, and if it's, which is energetic, right? So if we can clear our etheric body before that energy duplicates into the physical, like this little girl, for instance, she doesn't have, because now it looks like it's been resolved, but we can get it out of the etheric first before it duplicates. And if it has duplicated into the physical, then we work with that. But it has to come. You can't cut it out. That's what you can't go and, because it'll just come in somewhere else. It will duplicate somewhere else until it's dealt with.
So you gotta clear these blockages in energy to affect the physical realm. And once you clear that blockage, sometimes whatever that manifestation was in physical can go away.
Yep.
And you've helped. You told me about a gentleman who was a lawyer who had prostate cancer.
Oh, it's a different one. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about that, though. Tell me about that.
So with him, he came and he was looking at his options of surgery, right, or other painful things, prostate cancer, and his mother has a background in mediumship and things like this, but he came and we started doing work together every week. And my first session with him, I was shown all these experiences as a child, or him as a child, and he confirmed, yep, all these things, and then they showed me. I told him, "Don't tell me anything. I don't want to know where. I don't know the size, any of this." And so I put my hand on him, and I was able to see exactly where this tumor, quote unquote tumor, which I see as density, was in his prostate, exactly where it was sitting and the whole thing. And so we began, I with that one, it's insane, like basically started lasering it from here through down to the tumor. And he was given all kinds of self-care things, yoga, of course, and meditation, journaling, he's a healthy eater, but changing a few things. Like it's phenomenal, the guidance and the information that comes through for every single person and what it is that they need. And so today he doesn't have any measurable sign of cancer.
Wow. And he did the changes that were suggested to him through the spirit guides. And those changes actually manifested in him spontaneous remission of his prostate cancer.
Right. And I would put, my hands obviously over him and do whatever I was guided to do. Like I said, sometimes it's hard for me to remember because I'm in a different space.
I got to imagine, though, you get an incredible amount of pushback from doctors who say, yeah, come on, you didn't do this. It was just he would have had a spontaneous remission whether you had been there or not. What do you say to doctors?
Well, so it's interesting because yet another very recent happening was a woman who came to me. She had a horrible blood clot behind her knee and her left leg, and she's a young woman. So from her knee down, her leg was huge because she had an aneurysm
embolism, right?
Embolism, sorry, that went to her lungs. She shouldn't even be alive, right? But she somehow survived that. She came out of it with this big swollen leg, right, from the knee down. And they said, well, we put you on blood thinners and it'll dissolve or your leg will be fine within 3 months. So she waited 6 months and it became worse and very, very painful. She also couldn't work, couldn't do anything. And so she saw me on Facebook, one of my videos, and so she made an appointment with me. And that's when I started doing of course, she had to do emotional work because there was all this stuff that it was associated with this clot that was looked to me like a chunk of lava. And she told me 3 surgeons said there's no way we're not touching it because she was begging people to cut it out. She didn't care. And they said that, no, it's way too risky. So I began doing my work with her, and her grandmother came through, and powerful women, and guiding and giving information, and some that she remembered, some she didn't, and then she put the pieces together, all this stuff. Also doing energy work, and this is also when I was introduced to the acupuncture, my being able to see meridians and stuff, and so I asked an acupuncturist to come in because I was at a clinic where there was one, and she began needling and doing, of course she knows her own right to do. So then there were more needles that I was guided to say, I don't even know where the points are, right? But all of a sudden I would be like, here, on your head, and how about here? Is this a point? Is this a point? And they would all correspond with the injury, right? Somehow, which was astounding to me, but I could see them light up. I could see the meridians light up when the needles weren't, in the right places. And one day, she had worn leggings or something, and you can't, the doctor said you cannot put a needle through clothes. It's, so she's like, why don't you just put hands on instead? And I took my 2 fingers and put them, and it actually ended up being 3 fingers in this spot. And I put the other hand over the needles that were in her knees. And she was like, just lit it up, which was the first time I realized, wow, this is nuts. And so I thought I took my hands off and stepped away so that it subsided. And then I stepped back up and I put my hands back, and she said it was like electrical just running through her legs. We worked together 6 weeks, and she went after the 4th treatment, she woke up in the middle of the night with some pretty severe pain in the leg. And she woke up in the morning and her leg was back to normal size. She took a picture of herself wearing cowboy boots.
And how does the doctor explain what happened? What does the doctor say?
So that she went for a scan then 2 weeks after, because that was our plan anyway, and the scan revealed that this huge clot was down to the size of a very small flat pea.
Wow.
Right.
Operable or not operable?
It doesn't need to be.
Got it.
Yeah. So she's fine living life. But the doctor, of course, it's hard for people to believe, especially doctors, but this woman was inoperable, and, he was, of course, he could say that, he thought she was still on her blood thinners, and she had on her own decided to come off the blood thinners because I guess they weren't making her feel well or something like that, which I didn't, And so she said no, because she was pretty mad at the doctor, I guess, at the time. And she said, no, I was off the blood thinners. It has nothing to do with the blood thinners. So, we don't know. I mean,
right.
Who knows? We don't know. Is it what kicked in or whatever? But it's pretty profound that we were doing this work. And then.
And how many patients have you seen to date?
Well, some clients aren't medical, but I've seen probably about 400, 500.
Medical issues.
Oh, medical issues? Probably about 100.
About 100. Mm-hmm. And the others are non-medical, but there are issues that these people have that need to be cleared.
Right. Well, or just like they want information, like the guy that I told you that lost his wife in childbirth.
Sure. We got time. Why don't you share that story?
Okay.
Sure.
So he came to me, again, via word of mouth, because he had 6 months ago lost his wife in childbirth. Well, actually right after childbirth. So she went in, had the baby, and then her vital signs weren't, good. They weren't comfortable with them, the hospital, and so they told the husband, go ahead and take the baby home. So he took the baby home, think 2 days after, and they called him and said, your wife has passed away, and young woman. And so he came to me because he wanted to know, he wanted to ask her, or me to ask her, did somebody hurt you? Like, he was convinced, he and his family were convinced that somebody had to have gone into the room, pushed the wrong med. They were ready to sue the hospital, all this stuff. He's in enormous pain, right? He has a 6-month-old baby, missing, obviously, his wife. And so I tune in, and the wife comes through, and before she would tell him what he wanted to know, she wanted him to know that she didn't feel, she wanted to use her voice, which she couldn't really, she couldn't do that here. She wasn't strong enough, whatever, to just speak out. And she said, I really did have depression and I really did need support. And then, and you told me that having family should be enough. And this man was saying, he's like answering her back, like, like they were having this conversation
Through you.
through me, because she really was upset that, like, hey, I needed some support around my depression. And you basically blew me off. And then, so they had this beautiful healing around that, not being mad at each other and a complete understanding. And then she said, no, so what happened, I went really quick. All of a sudden, I got a lot of pain in my stomach, which I understand, from being a paramedic, we call that a AAA, an aortic aneurysm. And they are that fast. And there's not much you can do unless, you operate immediately before they blow. So she explained step by step what she was thinking in the moment, how quick it went. She wasn't scared, all these things, that nobody did anything to her. And then she went on to explain how that they had this soul level agreement, she and her husband, that her agreement was to bring this baby in because it was his soulmate, the baby, that to bring the baby in, but the baby was for him, and then for her to leave, and with a lot of detail. And it was just such a beautiful, healing. And the guy, I know people that know him, and like it was so helpful for him to be free of worrying about,
And getting on with
doing
what you're supposed to do, which
right,
is taking care of that baby.
Without worrying about his wife and did somebody hurt her and all these things. I mean, there's so many incredible non-medical.
And you're continuing to see patients. I mean, if people wanted to reach out to you right now, Bobbi, and say, I want to get a reading from Bobbi, how do they go about doing it? What would they do?
My website
which
is www.etheric, ETHERIC, medicine, medicine.com, ethericmedicine.com.
And then your name comes up, and then they can reach out to you by email and schedule.
Right. You can book a session right on my website.
And do I have to be physically present with you when I book a session?
No, I do. Right. I've done sessions in Spain, New York. I'm actually going to New York City as well, December 5th through the 9th.
Give those dates out. You'll be in New York City, December 5th through the 9th.
Through the 9th.
And available to do readings in New York City.
Yep.
And I should say, now 100% disclosure, you've done a reading with my daughter.
Yeah.
And getting ready to do another one.
Yeah.
And also with my wife.
Your wife.
And also with my mother-in-law.
Yeah. Your daughter's friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I say again, every single person that I know who has had a reading with you has come away just positively extolling what you've been able to do for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's my whole life purpose. It makes me so happy. So great and grateful to be living my life purpose and contributing in this way.
I think what I'd love to be able to do, we're almost out of time. I'm gonna definitely bring you back, because I think what we need to do is give more examples to people so they understand what it is that you're doing. But from being a medical intuitive, diagnostician, who's able to help people figure out what's going on in their physical plane, you can also help a person settle issues that they've had that may be just manifesting physically that are really more emotional issues.
Right.
And, to reach out and get a reading would be, for some people, would give a lot of people more peace.
It does. It does give a lot of people peace, even unexpectedly. I don't know how many people say, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting to, ask I have all these questions written down, and most of the time all the questions get answered, anyway.
Yeah.
But in way more detail, and it's beautiful. Like, lots of lives have changed.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm out of time. I want to make sure everybody at home understands again. Give it your website one more time, the Etheric.
No, just Etheric Medicine.
Ethericmedicine.com.
Right.
And the name is Bobbi Vogel. So make sure you get that right, but then come up on the line and send in a request, and you can do a reading by phone or live if you're in LA or you're in New York. You have to be in New York while you're there in a couple of weeks,
That'd be
in a
great.
month. It'd be great. You should sign up. And, I think we're going to I definitely want to have you back again.
That'd be fun.
And maybe, now here's the strange question, but you do this with individuals, but do you do this in space and time, meaning can you also diagnose societal ills? Can you diagnose things like that come to you?
Yeah.
Well, we ought to talk about some of the prognoses for some of the societal ills that we're having right now. And so I think that would be a really, really good opportunity. And then maybe one of these times we'll come up live and give you guys out there listening an opportunity to come in and maybe ask a question or two.
Yeah,
which would be good too.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Bobbi Vogel, for
you,
being a part of
Montel.
Let's Be Blunt today. And wait, can't leave without making sure I give you some thing to think about in the cannabis space. But just ponder this for half a second. Those that are listening, we've now been 3-4 solid years with medical and recreational cannabis laws changing across the country. 34 states plus the District of Columbia have some form of medical or, adult use cannabis, yet the stigma still seems to be there. What are you doing? Those of you out there that actually understand why people tune to cannabis, what are you doing to change the heart or a mind of somebody next to you? Because it's really going to be a movement of all of us working together to change hearts and minds, not just one or two people. So, next time you wonder how come the laws aren't different in my state, well, think about what did you do to help change those laws in your state. And with that, I'm going to say make sure you tune into the next edition of Let's Be Blunt. And thanks for being a part of this one.